first case was Schenck versus the United States Supreme Court in 1919. This landmark case was ruled that the freedom of speech can be restricted if the words printed or presented served as a danger to society. It was on the basis of the Espionage Act of 1917, which was shortly presented after the start of World War I, which prohibited interference with military actions. Schenck and Baer distributed 15,000 leaflets, which served against the draft of the United States military and told citizens to know their rights.
They were arrested for conspiracy against the Espionage Act by attempting to obstruct U.S. military draft. They both argued that they shouldn't be punished for this under the First Amendment, but it was a unanimous decision that during this time of war and rules were more strict at this time that they were guilty.
Our second case is Miller versus the State of California in 1973. The case included Miller conducting mass mailing of adult material to people throughout the nation. People complained to the local authorities, which initiated the case. The question about the case is the sale and distribution of obscene material by mail protected under the First Amendment freedom of speech. The decision in the case was a 5-4 decision against Miller, ruling that the material wasn't protected by the First Amendment rights, and the court also modified the test for purity about these materials.
The argument of the dissenting was their opinion on California's criminal statute is overboard and unconstitutional. If argue that the prosecution should not be available, the material was previously deemed obscene. The effects were that in the years since, many authorities have cracked down on adult theaters and adult material in bookstores, and also making the restrictions against public nudity more effective.
Our last case was Texas versus Johnson in 1989. Gregory Lee Johnson burned the U.S. flag outside the 1984 Republican National Convention in Dallas, Texas, in protest of Ronald Reagan. He was arrested and charged with violating the Texas statute which prevented desecration of a U.S. flag, and Johnson appealed and argued that his actions were symbolic speech. He was sentenced to 1 year in jail and a $2,000 fine. The main question of the case is, does the burning of the U.S. flag constitute symbolic speech?
The final ruling of the court was that the majority of the court agreed with Johnson and held that by burning the flag, he was protected under the First Amendment because it was a form of symbolic speech. Also, since no one was harmed in this process, it was also considered to be legal. And finally, the flag was his. It wasn't a state-owned thing, which if it was, he would have been punished more, probably arrested. But it was his own personal belonging of a flag, so it was okay for him to do with it what he pleased. And the people against Johnson said that burning the flag is never okay because the flag represents fallen soldiers and it honors them, so it should not be protected under the First Amendment.